Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to yet another special Claymation demo. I'm Tommy Sims.
And I'm Jamie Hazelwood.
And this time we'll teach you a little animagic. We're going to show you how to make this clay just disappear.
Whoa, jeez. Good golly.
Now, you're probably wondering where it'll go, but don't worry. We'll make it reappear as well. So, to begin your little animagic session here, we're going to take any ordinary colored piece of Sculpey 3 clay here. And I've just been kneading it to get it warmed up, because the squishier the clay is, the better it'll be to animate.
Wait a minute, what is kneading, Tommy?
Kneading is exactly what I'm doing here, Jamie. And it's just kind of mushing the clay over and over again, just to get it warmed up and soften it, because when you first open up the clay package, as you can see, it's a little bit hard compared to how squishy this clay is. So by just doing this over and over again, you'll get the clay nice and soft, and we'll be good to go.
Oh, okay.
So, to begin, what we want to do is, obviously, first set up our camera here. I want to make sure that all the settings are correct.
Which is, again, all relative. Your camera could be completely different, just as long as you get it on your comfortable settings.
Right. So I want to set up the shot here. I'm going to take a few establishing shots, because first off, we're going to make the clay appear out of nowhere.
Thus, the magic of claymation.
Yep. So once I have these first few establishing shots set up, I can begin to... One more. There we go. Okay. To begin, I'll take a little piece of clay off of the big wad of clay here and just place it right where I want it to appear. And try to make it as centered as possible. And I'll take a picture of that. And then I'll add a little bit more. Now if you pick your clay up like I just did, be mindful of where you had it in the previous shot. So that way it's in the same place every time you take your picture, and it doesn't look like it's bouncing all around.
And one thing that could help with that too is if you have it on something like a white piece of paper, how some of the clay kind of leaves its color behind if you have it squished on it. Kind of leaves a nice little marker for you.
Also, if you wanted to, if you're on a white piece of paper or something, just like in our timing for animation activity, you could put a little mark on the paper so you know where exactly the clay was. And your audience won't see it, because obviously every time you place your clay down, you're covering up that little dot. Now you just keep adding clay to it. And then once you have all the clay that you have to create your shape here, you want to take a few shots just so the image settles on your sculpture.
Thus the reaction.
Yep. And then this way your audience can see what has appeared out of nowhere. Then to make it disappear, what you can do is just take clay away from that and just reshape it to make it look like it's shrinking. Take a little bit more away.
A lot of these techniques the reason we're showing you these are really helpful with your sets if, someone's coming out of water or something where you don't have a set fully built, and with the magic, with your camera, with the trickery, you can make it seem like someone's coming out underneath the ground or something of that sort.
Right. Or even if you have, say, a mouse going into a mouse hole, instead of cutting a hole in the side of your set, you can just put a little black archway there and have the mouse disappear into it. You would just, for example, the mouse would be running in, you would take off, you would have its head right up against the wall, take a picture, take its head off the clay body, take a picture, and then take the body and leave the tail, take a picture, and then finally take the tail away, and it'll look like the mouse is disappearing into the wall. Now, the clay is fully disappeared. I'll take a few shots here. And then place it somewhere else to make it look like it's popping up elsewhere.
And even with this, now that we kind of been building up what we had before, we could even have it up here and start to squash and stretch.
Right.
Like it squishes out underneath the ground, or from underneath the ground.
So instead of just forming into the ball, we can have it jump right into the stretch here.
Almost make it look like a fish jumping out of water type of thing.
Yep.
And really, that's kind of the point of what we're doing. A lot of these, they're super simple, so that way, you know, you could say it's just a fish coming out of the water. You could say it's a squash and stretch thing. It's just a way to kind of get the imagination going. Whatever you guys would like for it to look like or look like.
So then, as you see, I just turned it around to make it look like it's bouncing to the other side, just like we did in the squash and stretch exercise. But instead of having it squash into the actual blob again, I'm going to have it disappear. And what I'm keeping in mind now is that follow-through movement. Because it's not just going to... The clay isn't just going to come in and then disappear straight down, like this. It's going to jump up, and then its tail is going to move along with it, so it'll eventually just be straight as it comes down.
Right, just like a fish going back in the water. Kind of goes back to what we're saying, action and reaction. A lot of this just sells believability, you know?
Yep. Take a few shots of an in-between again. And then we'll have it jump up over here. Now this time I'll have it jump up and then squash, and then it'll pop up or pop back into its ball shape that it was in. So by adding a little bit more every time, you're giving it the illusion of growing.
And remember, if you're wanting it to disappear without having it lose its shape, like without any sort of squash and stretch, there's ways that you can just get something of like a knife, which of course you have to be very careful with, but you just trim a little bit off there to make it look like it's not necessarily getting squished by anything in the ground, like it's just going straight down.
Right, butter knives work great for that, or if you go out to your local craft store, you can buy a box of clay tools, and they usually come with a dulled down clay knife inside of the box.
Exactly, because you don't need anything overly sharp.
But you can always use found household objects. I mean, toothpicks and paper clips and whatnot work great all the time.
Mm-hmm. That's kind of the really fun aspects with claymation. You don't necessarily need to buy a lot of that stuff. A lot of it's just whatever you can come up with in your imagination to make it work.
So we got him squashed here, and I'm going to take a few shots of it being squashed just to slow down the action of the movement. And then we're going to have it pop back into the ball. It's just a lot of shaping and reshaping.
That's a lovely booger you have there, Tommy.
Thank you, Jamie. I try my best.
You mean you pick your best.
Ah!
There you go.
So now we're going to have this little green guy roll away. Now what I'm having him do to start off with is rolling in a circle just to build up momentum. And as you can see, my movements aren't that very far apart. But as soon as he picks up speed,
You're going to spread them out more and more?
Exactly. The movements will be further and further apart.
And just let you guys know, it's not. Don't get too discouraged if your camera moves a little bit while you're pushing a lot of these. Accidents do happen a lot when you're trying to keep the camera absolutely still. I mean, we have something like a little tripod, which we've explained many times, which definitely helps when it comes to balancing out. That way you don't have to worry too much. But if you guys just have it, taped to a box or something of that sort, that also works. Just try to make sure that it doesn't move it as much. But like we're saying, a lot of this stuff is just so hands-on. Accidents are naturally going to happen.
And as you can see here, what I'm doing is I'm actually squishing the clay as it rolls away, just to give it a different kind of look as it rolls. So it's not just a ball rolling away, which we've done in the past 2 previous demos.
Why, that almost looks like it could look like be a snake or something.
Could be. Which leads us into our next demo, which you guys will have to wait and find out what that is.
Hint, hint. Spoiler alert. It's a snake.
Jamie.
It's true. You'll find these and other lame jokes all throughout our Claymation class. We like to keep it fun and interesting.
And actually, I'm going to make the snake disappear as it's rolling away. And it's also a matter of just taking clay away again and keeping that shape.
And notice too that he's just taking little bits at a time. If you take like a giant chunk, it could almost look a little bit too obvious.
Yep. But that also depends on how fast you want the disappear to happen.
Right, and that kind of goes back to our very first demo. And that's the main reason why we started with something like timing, because that's one of the most fundamental principles when it comes to any sort of movement.
And then I'll take a few finishing shots so I know where to end it. And then we can play back the animation on our camera here. Alright, so hitting the review button, I can play it back for you guys. First it'll be in reverse because obviously I have to get back to the first image, but as you can see, the ball appeared, squashed, stretched, disappeared. There we have our little magic trick.
Nice. See, and the great thing is, a lot of these are building blocks, as we've been saying. So, you can just take some simple blue paper, kind of make some little waves, and then you can turn that into a little fish, and you already got a short little film with little fish jumping out the water.
Yep. And there we have it one more time. And so we look forward to seeing you guys here back next time for one more demo that we have for you. And I guess until then, stay animated.
See you guys.